Hi, I'm Donna Ray.
And I'm Al Wadley.
Welcome to our podcast, Feldenkrais for Life.
In each episode, we will discuss ideas and experiences pertaining to the Feldenkrais Method.
You're going to learn skills that will move pain to comfort, anxiety to ease, and we'll explore learning and how to spark creativity.
To learn more about Donna, visit her site at donnaray.com.
To find Al Wadley, go to achievingexcellence.com.
Hey, Donna.
Hi, Al. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Well, we're going to have another interesting conversation today. We're going to talk about an idea that was near and dear to Dr. Feldenkrais, and this idea of 4 domains of human experience, which are moving, sensing, feeling, and thinking.
Yeah, and those domains address how we behave and how we function as human beings. And they're a way to look at our behavior and functioning and make some differentiated self-observations and observations of others.
And they're really all essential aspects of being human and being alive, in that moving is essential for all 3 of the other domains. So in order for us to be able to sense the world, we need to be able to move and move our attention, move our awareness to be able to take in sensory information, to see and hear and taste and smell and feel. And then feeling, he's referring to emotions, and all emotions require movement in order to be expressed. So if you think about feeling angry or happy, we know we can see somebody without any sound, and we can see that there's clear movements and clear postures that represent those feelings. And then thinking, of course, is also related to moving. There's certain postures and certain movements we do when we think, like with the eye movements. The eyes move in certain directions related to thinking. In visual thinking, the eyes tend to go up. Listening, the eyes are left or right. Then more internal processes like feeling or internal dialogue tend to be kind of downward. Everything is related to some kind of movement.
And yeah, so far, reflecting on what you're saying, the emotions, for example, are emotions. It's right there in the word. It has to do with movement and motion. It has to do with our neuromuscular configuration at that moment. Our whole self is represented in the motion, in the emotion. And we can see it in movement, posture, facial expression, tone of voice, all those things that are so important. And there's a fluctuation that goes on consistently with emotions, hopefully, for each one of us, because we don't want to get stuck in any one of those modes. We want to keep moving through them, spontaneously responding to whatever's going on. So we're happy, we laugh, we smile, we giggle. If we're sad, we pause. We may even shed a tear. But you keep on moving. And movement itself helps us move the emotions. So sometimes people do get stuck. They become fearful or anxious or angry. They stay in that mode, which is a certain state that they're in. And it could even be a state of resentment that's a reflection of feeling angry. It's like you can kind of see some of the basic emotions and how we have versions of them that are more intense and less intense. But it doesn't feel good to be resentful, for example. And if you're moving around the world and you're looking at everything from that point of view, you are maintaining a particular state. So even when something difficult happens, whether it's politically or somebody, has some discord in their family, if we shift our attention, use the vision, see the outside world, appreciate the trees and the sky and the clouds, it will change your state if you allow it to do so.
When you're talking, I'm being reminded of Dr. Feldenkrais' idea about the body pattern of anxiety and how we develop motor patterns connected to certain emotional states. And those are ones that we carry through time. So they go over a period of time. So we kind of habituated to the movements, to the holding, certain kind of muscle tensions around certain feelings. And so we talked a lot about that related to anxiety and all the ways that anxiety can be expressed, their insecurity or things like that. And how using movement through his lessons is a way to start to undo that and to create more flexibility, like you're saying, so we can move out of anxiety or move out of resentment or anger. We can have more fluidity. We can move into different kinds of emotional states.
Yeah, and I love the way that you're saying that. It's like we move out of that, we move into something else, we let something go. It's like the words that we use to describe the fluidity of our emotional state is also the movements that we're engaging in. And so, to go a little more into detail with what Dr. Feldenkrais described in The Elusive Obvious, the anxiety pattern is one of tightening up the front muscles of the body, so the flexor muscles. And if you were going to fall down, you would tighten up the front. You'd curl up. You'd be ready to roll into a ball so that if you fell down, you'd be protecting your organs and you'd fall in a way that you wouldn't bump your head. So in that contraction mode, we're protecting ourselves. And that's what fear is all about. But when we get into a habitual mode and we're tightening up the belly and tightening up the chest, it changes how we carry our head. It changes everything. So Dr. Feldenkrais said, hey, sometimes you don't have to say why. Why is not actually a useful word to use and to introduce the inquiry, I would say. So instead, you just lay on the floor or you sit in a chair and you do your movements. You reduce the amount of muscular contraction in that habitual way that you've been operating, and you actually feel different. It frees you up to move into another space, one of calm, contentment, maybe even joy. Movement's really where it's at.
There's a couple of things about how having that body pattern that we carry through time, that tension, we have those feelings and more commonly of anxiety or worry or fear. And even if there's nothing really to be worried or fearful about, it's just kind of a habit in the nervous system that keeps playing itself out through time. So our brains, being the smart creatures they are, start looking for things. There must be something to be fearful about. There must be something to worry about. So we'll start to find those things to kind of justify the feeling. And the other thing is that when we're experiencing that through time, we are limiting ourselves in our ability to move in other ways. So that constant contraction of those muscles to express and give that feeling limits us being able to do other things. So the flexors are contracted, the extensors are working harder. So people may end up with some back pain or some low back pain. The hip joints may not work as easily. Can lead to all kinds of difficulties. And if somebody needs to respond quickly to something or they want to take on a new activity, it's going to be impeded through this. So like Donna, like you're saying, we get on the floor, we start exploring movement is a nice way to start to unravel this and undo it and kind of come back to a more neutral organization from which we can move. And that kind of takes us into Feldenkrais' description of posture, which he called acture, the ability to move in any direction without preparation. So it's not just true for posture, but it's true for emotions and also true for thinking. It's true for sensing as well as, of course, for moving.
Yeah, so we can begin to see that all of those aspects of ourselves are connected. They're really a dynamic system. So if you're in a contracted state that exhibits fear, for example, like you're saying, your thought processes are exemplifying that fearful mode and looking out for danger. And when you unravel the contracted muscles, then your mind actually opens up. It's a very interesting feeling. As a seasoned Feldenkrais practitioner, I have had those moments over and over again where I might be ruminating, or sometimes I call it looping, having concerning thoughts. Do some movements, and all of a sudden it actually feels like there's more space, not only in my head, my chest, my belly, and everything is brighter around me. It's much more beautiful. So we're changing vision, we're changing thought patterns through movement, we're changing our sensations, and the way that we're able to detect fine differences in our sensations contributes to our ability to create this kind of sophisticated state shifting.
I want to emphasize the fact that we're not suggesting that we shouldn't have those kinds of feelings, but they're part of the human experience. And as we mentioned earlier, but to have the ability to move easily from one to another, because sometimes there are things to feel anxious about. There are things to feel sad about, and there's things to feel happy about. So we don't want to get stuck in any way, but to be able to move easily and comfortably from one emotional state to another. And you were mentioning changing the body pattern of anxiety, of fear, worry, how that opens up and it changes the thinking. It also reflects in the sensing as well. So if we're feeling anxious or fearful and the flexors are contracted, our attention is generally turned more inward. We're more caught up in thoughts and internal feelings and this kind of thing. And so when that starts to open up, our attention starts to move outward as well. And so we start to take in more sensory information from the world. We start to hear the outside world and see it and smell it. And that becomes some much more vital and invigorating. We start to be able to move back out into the world and sense it and interact with it, which isn't to say that internal state isn't useful. Sometimes you got to go inside and process something. You want to be able to come back out and feel yourself fully in the world.
Yeah, and in this method, in the Feldenkrais method, we go with what the person's doing. So we don't say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, or, shame on you. It's not about what you should or shouldn't be doing. It's recognizing what's going on for you and supporting it. So, for example, if we find ourselves feeling contracted in the front, in the chest and the belly, and the head is coming down, you can actually just look down a little bit. And listeners, if you'd like to experiment with this a little bit, you can try it. You just look down with your eyes and let your chest soften a little bit. And whether you're sitting or standing, round your back a little bit. Breathe out at the same time. So everything is going the same direction. Your breath, your eyes, the movement of your spine. And you go as far as what's comfortable. And then when you breathe in, lengthen your spine and look up a little bit. And just go as far as what's easy. Always stay within your easy range. And repeat that a couple more times. Looking down, move your eyes down. Breathe out. Round your back. Your lower back goes back. And notice how your head goes down a little bit easier. Your nose moves down toward the floor. And then breathe in and notice how the inhalation actually lifts your head. And you look up a little bit. And the front of your torso gets a little bit longer. And now just look forward, look around yourself, and observe yourself and see, has there been a shift? What are you noticing, Al?
Well, I think things are really looking up for me now. and literally, we often express our experience like that. I'm feeling down. And when we're feeling down, we are literally looking down. And then when we're in a good mood, so, well, I'm feeling really up today. Things are really looking up for me. Things are brighter.
I'm uplifted.
Yeah, uplifted. And so what I like about what you did was, helping us to just go into this roundedness and this feeling, but kind of in a way that separates it from the emotion. It brings it into the movement, the motion of the emotion, and working with that motion that's connected with it, and then starting to introduce some variations like lifting and breathing in and lifting the head, lifting the eyes, which starts to lengthen the front and help the extensors to become engaged in a way that is uplifting and brings you out into the world again.
And what Al is saying about extensors, we're talking about the back muscles. We're talking about being upright. And we know that the back muscles are we even call them anti-gravity muscles, because they can work all day long. They're meant to work. They don't even get tired if the front muscles aren't fighting with them and pulling you down. So that's the vision that you can have, is that when you lengthen on the front, your back muscles can do their job. And there you go. You have upright posture that's easier. It's easier to breathe. It's easier to look outside of yourself because you don't have a tug of war going on between the front side of yourself and the back side of yourself, literally. And that also goes along with what Al said earlier, is that sometimes people have back pain. And so it's not about working with the back, so to speak. It's about changing this pattern so that the upright feeling and the lengthening of the spine is accessible. And then the back pain actually disappears frequently.
Yeah, it is. It's like a tug of war that gets created when there's the feeling of the shortening in the front, and the back muscles have to work so much harder. And it creates compression on the joints and the spine. So through simple experiences like this, we can create the length through the spine, length through the torso, length in all the joints, which creates more movement, easier movement, and just feels better. You feel better, lighter, and yet curiously more grounded and more solid too, because you're really coming more back in sensing and being in the skeletal structure and having that support you in gravity with minimal muscular effort.
And as soon as you reorganize your trunk, that efficiency is translated down into your hip joints, your knees, your ankles, the balance that you're maintaining on your feet when you're walking, standing, and even the carriage of your head. So when one thing changes, and this is a dramatic change, organizing the front muscles and the back muscles through movement, everything gets easier, like you're saying. You feel better, and you're more likely to want to do something because it feels accessible and easier.
Now, I was reading Moshe the other day in Awareness of Movement. He's talking about how ideally all effort gets turned into movement, and effort that is not turned into movement turns into tension and creates compression. So by doing these kinds of lessons, these Feldenkrais lessons, we can learn to be really efficient in the use of our effort. So when we make a movement, it really is just moving through the whole skeleton. We're having a balanced movement between the flexors and the extensors, no matter what we're doing. And that creates this kind of lightness and ease in movement. It's a remarkable thing. And these lessons create such remarkable results so simply. Because Feldenkrais understood if we took the movement out of the emotion or out of the sensing or out of the thinking, and we develop the movement, we improve it, then all those other things, they also improve. The thinking gets easier, the emotions become clearer, and the sensing becomes more refined and more accurate and more enjoyable.
So let's try another experiment. Let's do a little experiment. So go back to the movement that we were doing just a moment ago of looking down, lowering your head, rounding your back, and breathing out. So all those things take place at the same time. And we're looking down with the eyes to begin with. So you can imagine looking down towards your knees if you're sitting, or the floor if you're standing. So you've got lots of things going on at the same time. Your head is lowering, your eyes are looking down, you're rounding your back, and you're breathing out. And then you come back up to the middle, breathe in. And now this time, as you start the movement, do everything the same except your eye movements. Look up with your eyes, but lower your head. Breathe out, round your back. It may feel very strange, actually, because you're differentiating your eyes from your head. So your head is going to go down and your eyes are going to look up, and then just come back to the middle. And notice your breathing while you do that. That's it. And now stay in the middle and start to look up with your nose, lengthen your spine, but look down with your eyes. And then come back to the middle and repeat that again. So lift your head like you're going to look up, but look down with your eyes and come back to the middle. Notice your breathing. Breathe easily and gently, even though you're doing something very unusual. And now when you come back to the middle, Simply look down and move everything together again. Look down with your eyes, round your back. Breathe out. And then reverse the movement, breathing in and looking up with your eyes, lengthening the front of yourself and sensing how your back arches back gently. And then come back to the middle and look to the right and to the left and notice how you're seeing, how you're feeling. What are you sensing?
That's a really fun exploration. I love the variations, moving the eyes opposite to the head and the rounding or the lengthening of the back. And my experience of that was one that I've had a increased range of motion. So I was able to round and fold more fully and more completely. And then I was able to lift up. It's actually all the way up to the ceiling. So I had this great, nice lengthening through the front and the extensors being engaged in the back. And it felt really nice. And then I also found that my breath opened up in doing that experience. So I found myself taking a few really just spontaneous deep breaths when I did that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of really nice things come out of that. Boy, I'm going to feel so good at the end of this podcast. I just can't wait to get
That's great. Well, and it is so important to see that just a few movement variations makes a really big difference. And the more you practice, the quicker the changes take place. You prime your nervous system to shift. You become more flexible and adaptable. And that's extraordinary, to be able to move from one state to another with that kind of facility. You know, we mentioned earlier that all of the emotions are available to us. They're there for a reason. They're actually motivators. Emotions are motivators. So if you're angry, you want to change something. You know, if you're sad, you're expressing yourself because some kind of loss has taken place, and that invites comfort from other people. So the emotions are meant to create something in your life. Now, we sometimes get stuck in them, and that's when movement really helps. So when we see that we stay in a particular mode, and it's a habit, it's a neuromuscular habit that can actually be changed. We can break that habit through gentle movement without having to continuously try to figure it out. You don't really have to figure it out. You've just got to do some movements and change it up. I find that so liberating, and my clients do too. They really find it to be incredible. I was working with a client this week. I've known him for several years, actually, and I see him only occasionally. And he was talking about how it works so well to tune into sensations to create a mood shift, and how that's liberated his life. And he said, you know, the major part of the day is appreciation and seeing the beauty of being alive, even when difficulties come up. And when we met years ago, he was habitually a sad, kind of downtrodden person. He's light, he's funny, and he can feel it all now. So it's so rewarding to see that kind of change in someone, but also to be able to practice it ourselves.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I certainly can say for myself, growing up, I had a very strong pattern of anxiety. And through my work in the Feldenkrais Method, that has changed. And I have so much more flexibility in movement, in emotions, in my thinking, and my sensing. You know, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful result of this work. So I'm grateful to Dr. Feldenkrais for creating this body of work and allowing us and making it teachable so that we can all learn it, and we can all practice it and benefit from it.
Yeah, it's been the same for me. The Feldenkrais Method has really reorganized me. I mean, I would say completely. I don't even know who I would be if I hadn't been practicing the Feldenkrais Method for the last 40 years, basically. I was introduced to the method in my mid-20s. And so it's been a long time. And I'm so grateful because I really see the beauty of each day, even during the pandemic. It's challenging some days, that's for sure. But even amongst the challenge and the losses that we all hear about and the illnesses, there's still the beauty of the day to be seen and absorbed. And there are movements to be felt and sensed that are pleasurable. And I often wonder about the ability of oneself and others to absorb the beauty of our lives. The earth is a beautiful place to live, and access to nature certainly brings that home. If you can go for a walk, if you can go to a park, if you can look up at the sky, it expands vision. It makes everything feel so much better to be tuned into nature. And even when we're doing that, we're moving. So you can be attuned to nature and be aware of how you're moving at the same time and breathing and expanding into the world around you.
Yeah, that's that whole moving into the senses and being able to take in all the sensory information that's coming in and really appreciate it. You just start to open that up and moving out into the world and listening and seeing, it creates length in front and it brings you more out into the world, and it helps to alleviate tensions and stressors that we're all exposed to, that we're all experiencing these days. So yeah, I'm right on with you. Going out for walks, getting in nature, doing those things really important for one's health and well-being.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed this conversation. I think it's got lots of twists and turns, and there's so much more to be said, but let's do that next time.
Yeah, we'll continue this topic, and we'll go into it a little bit more. It's one that Feldenkrais talked a lot about, and I think we have a lot to say about it as well. Hey, Donna, thank you so much, and it's great talking with you again.
You too. Thank you, Al.
Okay, bye.
Bye. If you'd like to follow up with a question, send an email to info@feldenkreisforlife.com. We would love to hear from you.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
You can find Al at achievingexcellence.com.
You can visit my site to join my classes and reach out to me for private lessons online or in my Longmont studio. You'll find my store, the Feldenkrais store, there as well. We can purchase books, audio products, and videos. Donna's website is donnaray.com.
And if you visit my website, you'll find that I'm offering individual sessions, group classes in the Feldenkrais Method, mentoring groups, professional Feldenkrais training program information, and recorded lessons.
Thank you again so much for joining us. I look forward to you hearing us next week.
Bye now.
Bye.